Towards Serenity, Zachary's wife, Mrs. Newman in chapter 1326 reveals her enduring bitterness. In the midst of making preparations for the meal, Mrs. Newman complains to her husband, Mr. Newman. She lists Serenity's supposed offenses, such as calling the police and imprisoning her daughter. Serenity has a particularly bad reputation with Mrs. Newman, who blames her for the family's problems. Serenity, in Mrs. Newman's opinion, is unable to function in their social circle because of a lack of sophistication and comprehension. She dismissively calls her a country bumpkin and berates Zachary for having the temerity to wed someone from a less wealthy upbringing. Serenity's union with Zachary, in the eyes of Mrs. Newman, is an attempt to exploit and oppress their family by abusing his position. Mr. Newman, on the other hand, has a more downbeat attitude. He admits that they have no say in Zachary's choice of a life mate and that Serenity is lucky to have gained his devotion. Old Mrs. York orchestrated the marriage of Zachary and Serenity in the beginning as a way of getting back at her, according to Mr. Newman. However, Zachary and Serenity's bond grew stronger as time went on because of his growing love for her. The conversation moves to their younger daughter Carrie and her probable future marriage as Mrs. Newman continues. Mrs. Newman hopes Carrie marries into a wealthy family, particularly the York or Stone families. She thinks that such a marriage would improve their social position and provide a better future for Carrie. Mrs. Newman suggests that Carrie might find a match in Anthony, the Stone family's available son. In order to avoid having Serenity and Carrie marry into the same family, Mr. Newman expresses his concerns regarding the relationships within the York household. He implies that Carrie might be eclipsed and influenced by Serenity because she is the oldest Mrs. York in her generation. The other sons of the York family are actually Zachary's cousins, not his brothers, as Mrs. Newman tries to minimize this by pointing out. Since each member of the family has a separate villa at Wild Ridge Manor, she thinks that Serenity wouldn't have any control over Carrie. The possibility of Carrie getting married into the York family, however, is questioned by Mr. Newman. In light of Zachary's position as the family's patriarch, he draws attention to the tyranny Carrie would experience as a York wife. As they discuss their goals and aspiration for their daughter's future while considering the difficulties and unknowns that lay ahead, the pair is filled with optimism and expectations for her.